Okay. I'm speaking as convener of the ad hoc group, working group on part 5. The presentation is split into main parts. The first 3 bullet points will cover the, let's say, the formal part, how this part very recently started is going to be developed. And in the last part, will provide a practical example of some good outcome provided by other projects that we are incorporating as an example. So the scope of this part 5 is the following. This part will provide guidance for validation and testing of data, metadata, and services as the main SDI components defined in the other parts of the technical report. And the guidance is given by means of a comprehensive framework complemented by examples of the validation and testing process required to assure conformance with the requirements existing in the relevant sources, implementing rules, standards, guidelines, regulation, etc. For instance, in the last CEN-TC 287 meeting, in which we had, as national bodies representative, to vote this scope, which is the first formal step to proceed, there was an abstention from one member state who was pushing to include in the source of requirements all the national laws, which in principle could be agreeable, but you can imagine how long this process could take, especially for some voluntary work that we are doing. But anyway, I think that these source of requirements listed here are enough at the moment. Which are the key points of this development? To be inspired by EN ISO 19105, which sets the rules for developing test suites. To look for applicable available examples, hopefully and necessarily, let me say, to be referenced in part 2, if not yet. To be closely linked with JRC related activities, and indeed we are close relationships with the people at JRC involved in developing the test suites of the data specifications. And of course, this is a question mark, what to do when test suites in the form of abstract or executable test suites are not yet available. The best way that we agreed to proceed is to provide examples. This is the first draft of the table of content. As Rob mentioned this morning, agreed through a participative mechanism and following a sort of standard in drafting the table of contents of the other parts. We will have the scope, introduction, terms and definition, abbreviations, and then we start the core part, which is the conformance, subdividing into subsections, the schema validation, general subclause, then validate schema, check transposition of specification, and check validatability. I will show you after what we mean. Then we will have the second section, which is, first of all, the schema validation. Secondly, metadata and data validation transformed according to the schemas. And so we have 2 subsections, validation against XML schema and rule-based validation with schematron. And then we'll have this very challenging part, which is the service validation with a general subclause, and then at the moment we have listed discovery services, view services, download services as the main components. And then, as usual, the Annex A, standards and implementation strategies, examples, and bibliography. Before now to present you this example that we are trying to bring into this part, following the exercise of raising hands, may I ask how many of you have at least had a look into at least one of the INSPIRE data specifications. Very good. Now, may I ask you, how many of you have spent, let me say, at least 1 week in going into the details, going through the UML project file, XSD, reading through all the details? Interesting. Okay, let's show these this example we made in the frame of one of these European funded projects. It was one of the main deliverables, very well accepted and acknowledged at the final review at JRC we had in October last year, and what we call the validation briefcase, a sort of physical or virtual briefcase in which we put all the tools needed to help data providers to self-validate data and metadata, not yet services, but data metadata they remodeled. Nature SDI Plus was a project dealing with 4 themes of INSPIRE: protected sites of Annex 1, and habitats and biotopes, spatial distributions, and biographical regions of Annex 3, but at the time in which data specifications were not yet available. Therefore, a quite complex data model has been developed by people working also with a technical working group. The validation methodology in these projects covers 2 main aspects: the validation of the specification encoding, first of all, and then the validation of data and metadata encoding according to the schema. So at the end, this briefcase is a set of tools and documents which can be downloaded from the internet of the project. Is an internet, but in order to access, you just need to register. I will give you, sorry, I have not the detail, www.naturesdiplus.eu. And it consists of the main Word document, which is more or less 100 pages going through all the requirements of the, data, for instance, for the protected sites, data specifications, and for all the requirements you see how for instance, where applicable, the schematron rules has been laid down in order to provide the full validation. Then there are these folders. First of all, where we have collected the schematron files, divided theme by theme, and also, for instance, some schematron file already available from INSPIRE for the general metadata, also for the GML. And then we have another folder containing tutorials that we have filled up following practical validation experience with, in this case, we used, for instance, 2 validation software, Oxygen and then XML Spy. And then we have also a folder with templates, for instance, for how to use a validation report. And also we collected all the XSD files needed, and also some report about the partners using this briefcase. So starting with metadata validation, the general process that we used is to validate against the target schema is a continuous loop in order to detect bugs, fix, and continue until you reach the final result. So just a brief mention about the datasets we used. The dataset that has been, and the corresponding metadata that has been validated has been the national dataset of Natura 2000 sites of Greece, downloaded from the AONET, and then a big work has been done in remodeling it from the European standard data form used by the EEA to the protected sites full application schema. In terms of metadata validation, I said validate again the target schema, then rule-based validation with Inspire metadata schematron, and then rule-based validation with Nature SDI with the project and theme schematron files developed for the project. In terms of data validation, more or less the same process with some little change in the steps, because validation against the target schema, of course, then rule-based validation with GML schematron, and then rule-based validation with theme schematron that in some case we had to develop for these, for the three now Annex 3 themes. This is a comprehensive table of all the stuff we needed to run the validation of the remodeled GML files, subdivided according to all the steps which are documented in the validation briefcase. And just some screenshot of how these can easily work with, for instance, with oxygen, but with any, the procedure can be applied to any software able to provide this kind of stuff. So just opening, selecting the GML file to be validated, and then opening it, it appears on the main screen. Then we have to select the option validate with what? In this case, you select, for instance, you have to make many validation steps. First of all, you have to validate according to the XSD application schema available through the Inspire website, and you select the option and select then the file, the target schema to validate against. And then you, you have to open you can also search the XSD through the network. And then when you press OK, at the end of the process, in the bottom line, they appears all the, in this case, a failure of the validation and all the errors detected during the validation process. Many of these errors at that time were due, for instance, to the fact that the GML element official site area, there was an error in the specification that we fixed and we reported to JRC because it was reported as a geometry type instead of a number as it should be. So some of the errors sometimes are becoming from error in the validation. Yeah, thank you. Then you can perform using the same procedure all the steps, for instance, for the schematron and the schematron validation. In this case, you see the green successful result. Finally, we provided some template to report these validation errors in order to fix them in an interactive way. And I think we found very useful because we validated, we supported the validation of more than 220 datasets and metadata coming from all the partners of the network. Just the last sentence. If any one of you have a GML file to try to make an example, we are happy to play the game with you with our laptop, also in the next days. So thank you.